You found a skeleton. How would you tell it's a dinosaur? You personally, how would you decide?
Well, interesting question. I don't know. I'd have to do some research on that.
Hey everybody, welcome to Dapper Reacts number 65. Before we get started, I want to say thank you to Ben, Deplorable Ilk, Thick Tunicate, B2022, who gifted 5 memberships. They went to Cross Platform Adventures, Jules Mac, Tom, Ian Chen Official, and Dr. Legendre. And also for $1.99, Asta Ordained a Scene Ryu says, AIG is a sack of pistachios. How is everybody today? I am unaccompanied by a guest. It is just me today. All of the guests that I tried to get on were unavailable. So yeah, it's just me today. That means I have to carry the entire show myself, which, you know what? I think I'll do okay. I hope everyone here is doing well. Do hit like before we get into it. For those of you who are new, the way this goes is basically I just take a look at some creationist nonsense and respond in real time. Now, because it's responding in real time and I don't always have time to, check all of my sources and whatnot, please, if you think what I said doesn't sound quite right, do check me. And also, take everything with a bit of a grain of salt. This is mostly just for fun. I am not activating the drinking rules per se, but then again, if you feel like you want to play along with the drinking rules, go for it. Have fun. That's in part because I just don't want to put any kind of alcohol in my coffee today because I'm already a little on the tired side. So I don't need anything helping me fall more asleep than I already am. I also have one thing that I want to say thank you for. So, Anne the Rock Gladstone sent me a plush face hugger from the Alien franchise from my Amazon wish list and sent a card that says, to make your day a little brighter, stay cool under that hot Arizona sun and enjoy your plushie from Anne the Happy Rock Gladstone. So thank you so much. I really do appreciate it. It's a lot of fun. I've already had fun, wandering around with it stuck on my face for fun. And I will try to stay cool. It is, in fact, a cool 84 freedom units right now. So, there you go. All right. Let's talk about, this is Dr. Thomas Kindell. His doctorate is in some kind of theology thing, if I remember correctly. And he is talking about soft tissues and dinosaur bones, because his big thing in this talk is that dinosaurs did not live millions and millions of years ago. And in fact, and I just missed a blank super chat from Katarn84, which is apparently their first super chat. So thank you very much. And that was not $1, €1. If you did in fact mess up and you wanted me to read something out, feel free to just tag me and I'll try to read that. Jillian married to DNA Ren says you can just play with your coffee. Here's the thing: playing with hot coffee, kind of hurts eventually. Because if I have to take 5 or 10 drinks in a row, it gets a little burny. So, trying in Italian, it says Katarn84. Iaju sono un sacco di cazzi. Alright, there you go. I don't think I knew that cazzi was a word for that. But I do appreciate it. So yeah, he's basically telling us how the various explanations that were put forth as to why it wasn't dinosaur soft tissue weren't correct. And he is right about that. They were variously disconfirmed or disproven, if you like, by various experiments done by Dr. Mary Schweitzer and others. But he's kind of iffy on exactly why they were wrong. For one thing, he said that, it couldn't be biofilm because biofilm doesn't have protein, which is dumb and wrong. Also Ordained is seen says, why not iced coffee then? I don't like it as much. That's why. I just don't like it as much. Plus, I tend to drink too much of it too fast because I don't have to moderate myself that way. So then I end up drinking an entire pot of coffee in one sitting, which is probably not good for me. And then Star Song for $2 says, Dr. Dino made an offer to join you. I will reach out during the break. I don't want to have too much of an interruption right here, right now. So, if during the break Dr. Dino wants to come on, I'll bring him on around then. Did I see the Aurora Borealis last night? Unfortunately, no. I was just too far south. I know that it was visible in some parts of Southern California, but I am south of Southern California. I think that's about as far south as it went. So yeah, I did look for it. But yeah, no luck. Dr. Dino for $2 says, Ola, if you still want me as a guest, I'm free. Like I said, I will reach back out around the break time. So that's about an hour in. And then Donner Haramio says, I'm hallucinating yodeling from the top frames. Yeah, it is very, very yodely in here, despite the actual lack of real yodeling. But anyway, let's see what Dr. Thomas Kindle has for us. I still don't know if it's Kindle or Kindle, and I'm going to probably go back and forth on it. So, Dr. K? No, I don't like that, because that sounds like too much like the mentor from Power Rangers RPM, which is a character I really like. So, whatever. Dr. K, if you see this, feel free to correct me on the pronunciation of your last name, because I don't want to get it wrong. I just don't know where to check. So, if any of you know anyone of this name, or that's your name yourselves, feel free to let me know whether it's Kindle or Kindle or something else. All right, well, here we go. Let's hear what else he has to say about dinosaur soft tissue. Oh, basically, he's just saying biofilms can't look like red blood cells, which, yeah, okay, he's right. So, no hemoglobin protein has been found in dinosaur fossils. What has been found are heme-derived porphyrins, right? So porphyrins are a particular class of chemical, and hemoglobin can break down into various heme-based chemicals. And these heme porphyrins are extremely stable. Oh, there's no sound? Oops. Well, I guess Dapper's a professional this time. Yeah, you're right, there is no sound. Well, I told you what he said anyway, and he said that we found hemoglobin, so... Oh, and Caden says, sorry you missed out, I'm glad I got to see it last night. I would have loved to see it, but... I think I would have had to drive several hundred miles north. I don't even know if they were visible from Phoenix. Does anyone know if they were visible from Phoenix? Because, you know, Phoenix is considerably farther north than I am. So, yeah. Arter Ams, who's been a member for 10 months and is at the amulet level, says, if someone believes in hell, shouldn't they wish for the existence of extinction of humanity to prevent potential untold billions from the possibility of hell? I mean, I can understand that reasoning, but I don't know that that would necessarily be the desire that you would take away from it. Plus, it's also the case that not everyone who believes in hell believes in an eternal conscious torment. Some people believe that there's a temporary conscious torment followed by essentially annihilationism. There are also universalists out there who still believe in a hell, in that people in hell can get out of hell at some point. So maybe they would wish that that would happen. In fact, actually, universalism with the idea that there is some kind of damnation, but that it's escapable even post-mortem, is an idea in Christianity that goes very far back. So, I guess in conclusion, the answer to that is maybe. Maybe.
Very, very intact, beautifully preserved bone that has not been mineralized.
Kind of. Like I said before, I don't know of any reports of fully unmineralized dinosaur bone. However, there are some dinosaur bones that are only partially mineralized. And that's in part because, you know, bone is already a mineral. So.
The next one is ovalbumin, a unique protein found only in eggshells. We've found it intact in dinosaur eggshells.
Again, these are degraded versions of the protein, right? So it's kind of like if, let's say you go to a junkyard, right? And you see a pile of frames and door panels and engine bits and whatnot. And you take a look and you're like, well, these used to be, you know, a Ford F-150. Okay. Did you find a Ford F-150? Well, in some sense, yes. You know, that is a Ford F-150, or at least what's left of it, right? But in another sense, no, you didn't. You did not find a fully constructed, ready to drive off the lot Ford F-150. You found bits and pieces left over from a Ford F-150 that has been variously scrapped for parts, has fallen apart, rusted in areas. And so, to say that, yeah, you found a Ford F-150, with the implication being that you could have driven it off the lot, or to say that, like, look, it's like brand new, how could it be old? Well, that doesn't quite work based on what you found. And that's basically what we found in all these soft tissue things, right? This isn't hemoglobin, it's not albumin, it's degraded, very, very stable chemicals that are what's left over when these things decay and aren't eaten by something. Katarn84 with what is allegedly their first super chat for €1 says nothing again. So thank you very much. Pillowpunk, half dog, half canine for $2 says, finally got a Saturday off work. We're back, baby. Well, congratulations. I'm glad you got a Saturday off work. All right, I'm going to hit play. Also, I think my next cup of coffee is going to have some vanilla in it. I need something to give it a little bit more kick. But, that isn't going to make me tired again.
Chitin, a polysaccharide, but separate from the kind that you find with bacterial films.
Chitin's a protein. It's the thing that makes up the shells of insects as well as the cell walls of fungi. So it's not a polysaccharide, it's a protein. But then again, chitin is already, much like the collagen that we talked about last time, already a very tough and long-lasting kind of a thing. So it's actually not all that surprising that we could find even fairly intact chitin. But even then, it's not going to be completely intact, and it isn't. So, Katarn84 says, every time I change the value, I fail to send the message. That's weird. AIG is a pouch made of Medokwa Quinteri leather, which is not a term I'm familiar with, but I can guess what it is. So, yeah.
Bone that's supposed to have been in the rock for scores of millions of years, yet there's been no mineral infiltration.
There's no such fossils that I'm aware of any dinosaur from the Mesozoic, right? If you want to say like, oh, well, I just killed a chicken and that's some unmineralized bone. Okay, great. But in terms of Mesozoic bone, I'm not aware of any that has no mineral infiltration. And one of the things is some of the mechanisms of mineral infiltration may actually provide additional preservation of the remains of soft tissue. For instance, if the minerals that invade are high in iron, that might help with the preservation. Because one of the mechanisms of this preservation is called iron cross-linking. And so what that basically does is it takes these very long, chain organic molecules, and it adds additional places where they cross over each other and are chemically bonded in places they normally wouldn't be in life. Now, that right there strengthens the entire molecule, and it makes it last much, much longer. In some cases, even indefinitely. And humans already know about cross-linking. In fact, it's the method of action by which formaldehyde preserves things. So if you've ever seen something preserved in formaldehyde, the reason it's not decaying, even regardless of whether or not there's bacteria in there, because the bacteria would die anyway, but even without them, things do tend to break down. And the reason it doesn't break down as quickly in formaldehyde and can last almost indefinitely is because formaldehyde induces protein cross-linking. That's why you can go into a museum and look at a specimen of like a fish or something that's been preserved in formaldehyde for like 2 centuries, and it looks like it was just dropped in there yesterday. Pillowpunk, half dog, half canine for $5 says, chitin's so tough, in fact, it's basically impossible to overcook mushrooms unless you get them hot enough to burn. Yeah, that's a good point. Which is one of the great things about mushrooms, right? It's almost impossible to overcook mushrooms. You're not gonna, just as long as you don't get them to the point where they blacken and the proteins just break down into nothing, they're going to be just fine. I'm a big fan of mushrooms. I should go get mushrooms, is what I'm really thinking, is that, yeah, next time I go to the grocery store, I should just get some mushrooms. Maybe I can actually just replace a meat in a dish with a bunch of mushrooms. Yeah, I'll make some mushroom stew or something. Well, now I'm just hungry. Gosh darn it, Pillowpunk, this is all your fault. All right, here we go.
Might expect that on a few thousand years, but not millions of years. Collagen, skin, intact. And
so again, neither of these things are intact. There is actually no preserved skin in the sense of the actual tissue is what's preserved. There are skin impressions, and there are mineralized casts of skin, but there is no actual original biomolecules from the skin that is intact that I am aware of anywhere in the literature. And even with the skin impressions and whatnot, it's very unusual. One of their best instances of skin preservation is in a hadrosaur nicknamed Leonardo. And that actually has stone that has replaced the skin across much of the body of the animal in question. And that's pretty cool, and it's given us a lot of insight into the actual life appearance of hadrosaurs. But again, it's not actually the skin. Jillian, married to DNA Ren, says, if you're ever up in the back up in the Pacific Northwest, I'll cook for you. I mean, I have considered going back and just hanging out. But then again, I also realized that a lot of the people I knew out there are no longer out there. So it's one of those areas where it's like, if I went back there and like the people I normally would be going back to see are mostly gone, then what am I doing? Am I just gonna hang out in Seattle? I guess I could hang out in Seattle. Let's see. Fear Pre-Yiddish Monger says, Dapper, you gotta be specific with the mushrooms. You want something that resembles the texture of steak or something that'll make you see God? Well, I mean, yes, obviously I'm going to pick which mushroom I get based on exactly what I'm going for. Although I feel like if it tastes enough like steak, maybe that on its own would make me see God.
Some of these dinosaurs even have proteins intact, such as the pigmentation agent melanin.
Melanin, okay. That's not it. It's melanin, but first, all the previous things that you were talking about, my guy, were all proteins, right? Like collagen and albumin and whatnot. This guy just doesn't seem to know what a protein is. It's basically what it comes down to. I don't think that he knows that a protein is a chain of amino acids. Like, I don't even think he knows that very basic thing. But second, we actually don't have a whole lot of preserved melanin. We actually do have a little bit. For instance, the Protoroctopus fossil was found with some preserved melanin, if I remember correctly, like the actual holotype. And one of the reasons for that is melanin is an extremely tough protein. The reason that a lot of birds that have very colorful feathers still have black tips to their feathers is because the melanin actually provides structural strengthening to the tips of the feathers, which is the part of the feather that is most likely to be worn. By that I mean wear down. Did he say melanin? Maybe I just misheard. And Elephant says, are they still butchering Mary Schweitzer's work? Yes, but also the work of other people who've gone and found other things after she did. But also, most of what we find in dinosaurs is not preserved melanin. Rather, it's the preserved in stone impression of melanosomes. So melanosomes are little sort of organelles that contain melanin. And a lot of the cells that produce melanin produce them in these melanosomes, and then the melanosomes are actually taken outside of the cell and put into the intercellular matrix to color whatever it is that they're coloring. And in a lot of the cases of dinosaur integumentary structures, like filaments that are sort of like proto-feathers, or even actual veined feathers, when you look under extreme magnification, we're talking like scanning electron microscope, you can actually see the shape of the melanosomes. But what you're not looking at then is the melanin. But that being said, like I said, melanin is an extremely tough thing that can stick around for years and years and years. It's one of the reasons why leather doesn't fade a whole lot, right? You buy a black leather jacket that's actually not dyed black, like a dark brown leather jacket that's actually just the skin color of the animal, it's not going to bleach anytime soon. Part of that is because melanin is a tough chemical.
That protein is in there. And we have FEX proteins. We have actual fragments of DNA. Now, DNA is much more susceptible to thermodynamic breakdown and radiation bombardment breakdown than proteins.
So the thing about the fragments of DNA is it's just that. It's fragments, right? Over time, links in DNA will start to break down. But then what happens? Well, now you just have two smaller bits of DNA. If that keeps going over time, it just means you get smaller and smaller bits of DNA. And so how big should the pieces of DNA be after, say, 70 million years? Well, the answer isn't 0, right? They shouldn't be 0 in length. So finding fragments of DNA with extremely sensitive tests for DNA, not actually super unexpected. Not that unusual.
Protein's about 500% stronger in that regard. But even on a time scale of several thousand years, you would expect to find at least fragments of DNA, and they have reported that.
I mean, you would over the span of millions of years, too. It's just that they would be smaller DNA. Asa Ordained to Scene Ryu for $4.99 says, I have a leather jacket that my grandpa had got when he was a teenager 60 years ago. It's as good as new color-wise. Exactly, right? Because melanin is an extremely tough molecule. If that's the thing coloring your leather jacket, it's sticking that color for a while. Let's see.
Along with the particular type of proteins associated with DNA called histones. And
I mean, histones are a structural protein that helps chromosomes take their shape. And again, we're not finding intact histones. Like, I'm familiar with all these reports. None of them are reporting intact proteins. But yeah,
keratin. And in the lower right-hand corner, it's showing them stretching organic tissue. What gives it that stretch? Well, it's the presence of a particular protein called elastin. And as the name implies, it imparts elastic properties.
I'm not stopping for every single one because it's the same answer for all of them. Yeah, we found degraded and cross-linked versions of all of these. None of them are intact.
The tissues. And you have osteocalcin and actin and tropomyosin and other things, just should not be there. None of these proteins should exist after just several tens of thousands of years.
And they don't, right? That's the thing. Fundamentally, they don't exist after tens of millions. And we haven't found them in things that are supposed to be tens of millions of years old. We found molecular fossils of them. They're fossilized in much the same way as anything else fossilizes. Something that preserves it comes by.
Of degradation by thermodynamics and ground radiation. So, now, again, we have Dr. Schweitzer and a couple of other evolutionist scientists publishing here in PLOS ONE Science magazine under the title of Testing.
Hey, do y'all remember that time that Raw Matt, Uncooked Matt Nyler, decided to upload something that had the PLOS ONE logo and a fake DOI number that he had written in horribly formatted and almost in completely incoherent English, as if to say that he had actually had this published by PLOS ONE, and then, pretty much everyone called them out on it immediately. Yeah, I remember that. I also remember the time that right on Christmas Eve, his raw Google Docs file for that leaked, and it had editing on. No, it had commenting on. And so that one Christmas, the science friends got to just completely tear that thing to shreds in the original Google Docs article. What a wonderful Christmas miracle. Look, if anything will convince you that there is a God and that he celebrates Christmas, it should be that. Because, my goodness, that was amazing. Also, beer. Because beer is proof that God exists and that he wants us to be happy.
The hypothesis of biofilm as a source for soft tissue and cell-like structures preserved in dinosaur bone. And after that came out, a whole bunch of other ones came out, and they all said the same thing. It's not visibly the same, and its molecular structure is radically different. It can't be an adequate explanation.
And he's right about that. And also, by the way, every once in a while, the video pauses and the audio keeps going. That's in the original. I don't know if it was a problem with the recording device or with their, file compression or what. That's just what it is.
This appears to be real and not some anomaly.
Yeah, I mean, it is.
Okay, well, clutching at straws, they came up with the Maillard reaction.
It's Maillard, not Maillard or Maillard or whatever. But, okay.
You know what Maillard reaction is?
No, I know. It's the thing that turns your food nice golden brown when you put it in the oven or on the stove. It's basically the reaction that makes things taste good to humans.
Well, it basically means it was subjected to heat and toasted, okay? So that when you put a slice of bread in your toaster, if it's subjected to the right amount of heat, it will turn brown. That's a chemical reaction with the chemicals in the bread with the heat that makes it brown. Now, if you do it too long, it will carbonize and get black, okay? But mild heating within a certain temperature range will produce a browning effect called the Maillard effect.
Maillard again. But also, I noticed that the sources that we're citing today are from the Institute for Creation Research. Were there any real publications from, journals about this? Triceratops with the mallard emoji. Nice.
They say, well, this Maillard effect makes it really super tough so it can last for millions of years. Really.
I mean, so the Maillard reaction does in fact break down proteins into more stable bits. So why don't we talk a little bit about what chemical stability really means, right? Okay. So generally speaking, everything in the universe, right, likes to be in the lowest energy state available to it. Things spontaneously go from high energy to low energy states when that's allowed for them. That's why hot things will radiate heat away into deep space if you just leave them on their own. That's why there's a lot of instances of things like that, right? That's why certain chemicals just spontaneously break down. Because there's lower energy configurations. And one of the only things that happens spontaneously in physics, reliably, is things going into lower energy states. For instance, if you look at, say, a light bulb, right? Every time a photon is emitted, what has happened is that an electron has dropped from a high energy state to a lower energy state. Asta Ordained Scene Ryu for 199 says, to be fair, our guest probably can't pronounce the, well, okay, yeah, the little, I mean, I'm not good at it either, but he could not use the L, right? Like, he could just put a little IPA-J in there. Cognitive Trifurcation for $2 says, why does he keep talking about this lard reaction? About his lard reaction. Yeah, I don't know. Hey, Tom, what's up with your lard reaction? You cooking a bunch of lard? I mean, to be fair, lard can be very delicious. So, I mean, it's a pretty good fry oil if you want some extremely unhealthy but extremely delicious fries. So yeah, anyway. Oh yeah, energy states, right. So one of the things that the Maillard reaction does is because it allows things to overcome the activation energy for spontaneous chemical reactions, it takes various things like proteins and then excites them thermally, allowing them to drop into more stable configurations, which they then can maintain after the food is down. So that's why even if you have like a cold steak, right, but if you have a nice crust on it, it's still going to have that flavor of the sear on it. And I mean, that's true for anything else, right? Heather Cursorial Angiosperms Coon for 10 months, who's been a member for 10 months, is at the amulet level, says, Maillard is pronounced Maillard. The D is silent. Oh, and it's your birthday! Happy birthday, Heather! That's awesome. Everybody, say happy birthday to Heather Cursorial Angiosperms Coon. And then for $5, Pibblepunk, half dog, half canine, says, You know what else is improved by Maillard reactions? Mushrooms. This is correct. And that is followed by a drink emoji, an AIG is a bag of dicks emoji, and then all three of the kaiju emojis. Thank you very much, Pibblepunk. So when things are in a lower energy state, because they're more stable, that's likely to persist. So it is the case that if you heat up a whole bunch of proteins, they drop into a more stable configuration, they're going to last longer in that new configuration. Now you can figure out what the original protein is because we know about various reactions and we know what things various proteins can break down into. But I mean, it's pretty obvious that this is a thing that can help preserve proteins for longer. But also one of the biggest things is the iron cross-linking, which I'm hoping he'll talk about.
How does it make it magically no longer susceptible to ground radiation or the second law of thermodynamics? Furthermore, it's a...
Well, it doesn't, but because they're more stable, they're less likely to decay, right? That's what it means to be more stable. They are in a lower energy state, which means they're more likely to persist in that state. And in fact, they're even more likely to go back to that state after being excited. So while it doesn't make them immune to radiation, the effect of radiation is essentially to raise the energy level of the thing that hits it, right? It transfers energy, and sometimes it can transfer actual mass in the case of like neutron capture or whatever. But fundamentally, what radiation generally does is it transfers energy to a molecule or an atom. That makes it excited. Now, if that excitation is enough that it can break a chemical bond and then send that molecule into another chemical state that's lower energy, that's what we're talking about when we're talking about radiation destroying things, right? But if you're already in a lower energy state, then a given amount of energy is less likely to be able to actually drop you to an even lower energy state because you're already in a more stable configuration. Does it make you immune? No. No, it doesn't. Does it give you additional resistance? Yeah. Like the difference between damage reduction and damage immunity in Dungeons and Dragons. Because, I haven't been nerdy enough today.
Relevant. Almost all of these 50-plus examples that have been published in the refereed science journals admit that there is no evidence of Maillard reactions. There is no browning. No evidence it was subjected to excessive heat.
Well, underground it can be pretty hot, but okay. Again, it's iron cross-linking that is currently the best explanation that fits most of the data. I'm just pointing out that this is an actual option that could explain some amount of protein preservation.
So if it's going to explain everything, it has to explain everything across the board, and almost everything that's been published doesn't have evidence of Maillard interactions.
No, that's not true. soft tissue could in fact be something that is explained by more than one mechanism. And some soft tissue could be preserved by one mechanism, other soft tissue preserved by another mechanism, and some soft tissue could even be preserved by a combination of more than one mechanism. It is not the case that in order to explain the preservation of soft tissues in dinosaurs from the Mesozoic, we need one single explanation to rule them all. That's not how reality works. Jillian, married to DNA Wren, who's been a member for 14 months and is at the amniote level, says, when Alton Brown knows more about aspects of science than you do, maybe it's time to go back to school instead of giving lectures with a Mothra emoji. There. Although, Alton Brown, isn't he one of those guys that does a lot of like culinary science stuff? I feel like he actually has a pretty good education on that.
So again, it's just a hypothesis of desperation. Now, this little ditty on YouTube, I quote from it a bit and show some of the slides from it because it pretty much summarizes the current state of the scientific community.
Wait, isn't that from Stated Clearly? Like, the channel Stated Clearly? I feel like that's from Stated Clearly.
In trying to poo-poo this evidence. And Mary Schweitzer herself, who, believe it or not, is a professing evangelical Christian.
And former young Earth creationist, let's not forget.
But she's one of many evangelical Christians who believe that God just used evolution as his means of creation.
Which may include a lot of the people who invented the idea of fundamentalism. Remember, the people who actually created the term fundamentalist Christianity were almost all old Earth creationists. So, here we go.
And so he took billions of years. Some of them believe in the progressive creation theory, which is that God created single cells billions of years ago, and then he created marine invertebrates millions of years later, then fish, amphibians, reptiles, mammals, finally man, over a spread of many hundreds of millions of years. Of course, it doesn't say that in his Bible.
Yeah, okay, but it also doesn't say that there were, say, dinosaurs in the Bible. It also doesn't say that there was a post-flood ice age in the Bible, yet virtually all young Earth creationists believe in that. There are so many things that young Earth creationists believe in that just aren't in the Bible, that hearing one of them object to someone else believing something about the past because it's not in the Bible is kind of laughable, right? Plus, there are things that are in the Bible that young Earth creationists don't believe, right? The Bible talks about the pillars of the earth and the firmament of the heavens and the windows in the firmament that let in not just rain, but also sleet and snow, and that those things, the rain, the sleet, and the snow, are stored up in storehouses, things that you could presumably physically walk into. Creationists don't believe in that. The Bible describes the sun as set in the firmament, and even if you say that the firmament is just the sky, the sun, and also, where the birds fly, because that's why they say it's just the sky, because the birds are supposed to be flying across the face of the firmament. Okay, so if you just think the firmament is basically the atmosphere, well, the sun sure isn't as in the atmosphere, so you're going to be a flat earther about it. So it's always frustrating to me when almost anyone simply says that their reason for believing something about the past or about history or science or something like that is just that it is or isn't in the Bible. Because no one actually takes that consistently, except maybe the flat earthers. But even then, they ignore lots of contradictions, so who cares? Plus, they're flat earthers.
But it's obviously trying to accommodate secular views on the age of the Earth and the age of the fossil record.
It's trying to accommodate the actual evidence, right? Because let's remember, the views that scientists take on topics are primarily the views that are the ones based on evidence. When the scientific community figured out that the Earth was 4.5 or so billion years old, it wasn't because they hated the Bible. It's because that's where the evidence pointed. And if you want to ignore the evidence and instead take your particular or internally inconsistent version of the biblical text as, the gospel truth, okay, you can do that, but you have to recognize that fundamentally that is not an evidentiary stance that you're taking. That is the stance that you are taking because you have decided as some kind of doctrine that a particular version of the interpretation of the Bible is just going to be the thing that you accept as true. Contra to the evidence. Again, you're allowed to do. I'm a big fan of, intellectual freedom and freedom of religion and all of that. But you have to understand it's not the evidence that's pointing you in that direction.
So I'm not saying she's not a Christian. We're saved, thank God, by our faith in Christ as our Savior, and acknowledging that we're sinful and that we need His grace. And, we can be in error in certain areas as long as we don't err in the fundamentals. Deity of Christ, virgin birth, resurrection, things like that.
Hey, you think this guy's ever read James where it says that you're not saved by faith alone? I don't know. Now, I know Martin Luther wasn't a very big fan of that book of the Bible. He thought about taking it out, apparently. But, just another pointing out where, hey, this guy he cherry picks the Bible just as much as anyone else. Salvation by faith alone is not something you can unambiguously pull out of the New Testament. Sorry. Now, salvation involving faith as a necessary component, sure, you can pretty easily get that out of there. Faith alone? Mm-mm.
We cannot give up. We'll fight and die on those hills. But in this regard, she professes evangelical Christianity, but because she believed in an old earth, this bothered her.
Except she didn't believe in an old earth until after she started working in paleontology, right? That's the thing that I want to drive home. Dr. Mary Schweitzer is not just a Christian. She was a young earth creationist when she showed up to Jack Horner's lab. When she met Jack Horner to go work for him, one of the things she told him was that she was a young earth creationist. And contrary to what you hear from a lot of creationists, rather than calling her an idiot or tell her that she has no chance or just rejecting her outright, basically, she was told, hey, do good work and I don't care. Just do good science. Turns out that she did do good science, and so she wasn't tossed out. But, unfortunately for young earth creationism, doing good science is fundamentally incompatible with maintaining a belief in young earth creationism. Asked to ordain to Senior for $4.99 says, yes, Tom, you are saying that Dr. Schweitzer, the former young earth creationist, is not a Christian. I actually don't think he is, though. That's the thing. I do think that he honestly believes that Dr. Mary Schweitzer has what he would consider a salvific faith in Christ. Which is a really weird phrase, but whatever.
Instead of saying, hey, all my atheist colleagues who always pester me and tell me I'm stupid because I'm an evangelical Christian,
Which they weren't doing specifically. That, as far as I can tell, is never something that Dr. Schweitzer has ever accused anyone of doing, is pestering her specifically for being a Christian. I don't know of anyone who was in college who was pestered specifically for being a Christian. I have never seen anyone in a college setting being specifically pestered for being a Christian. Now, if your Christianity leads you to absurd beliefs that are unsupported by the evidence in a particular field, and you're in that field, then those specific beliefs might be the subject of some derision, but not Christianity as a whole. There are many, many very famous, very well-regarded Christian scientists in all sorts of places in science. And by Christian scientists here, I don't mean the Mary Baker Eddy kind. I mean just, scientists who happen to be Christians.
This showing, guess what? The Bible is literally true after all. None of these bones can be as old as what they claim or what is necessary for evolution to be true.
Funny then how the former young earth creationist, who is a Christian, and who I would think would have every motive in the world to confirm young earth creationism, the default belief that she came with as a Christian to this lab. It's funny how she didn't ever seem to notice that this actually supported that. And the answer is because it didn't, right? Now, I said this last time, but I'm going to repeat it today. We have two basic options. We can say, okay, there are currently unknown preservation mechanisms for soft tissue, and we should probably investigate what those are. And if we find out what they are, then hey, cool, now we know more about fossils and dinosaur remains, and we can learn more about ancient life than we ever thought possible. The other possibility is that essentially all of science is wrong. Geology is wrong, paleontology is wrong, astronomy is wrong, physics is wrong, just generally physics is wrong, right? Relativity is wrong, nuclear physics is wrong, quantum mechanics is wrong. All of these things are wrong. That's the other option. Because remember, for young earth creationism to be true, it has to break essentially every single thing about science that we know. All of science has to be fundamentally wrong in order for young earth creationism. I have yet to find a part of science that I've actually investigated that does not in some way contradict young Earth creationism. I used to say optics, but then I realized that because optics is so tied to the speed of light, and because the speed of light is a problem for young Earth creationism, given how far away things in the sky are, that yeah, optics itself actually is a problem for young Earth creationism. So I don't actually know a field of science that is not broken by young Earth creationism. So yeah, on the one hand, hey, maybe a new chemical process we don't know about. On the other hand, literally everything we know about the universe is wrong, completely. Is it really any surprise that scientists didn't take the literally everything is wrong approach? Not to me.
The only objective answer is that creation is literally true, like the Bible says. The Bible has been vindicated.
No, that's not literally the only option. That's why there are attempts to find chemical solutions to the problem, right? The fact that something is unexpected does not mean that a contrary position must be true. That's not logical. Now, I'll grant you, if young Earth creationism were true, it wouldn't be surprising to find extensive soft tissue preservation in dinosaur bones. Fair enough. If you want to take that as, like, one of the only ever confirmed predictions for creationism, I'm not going to stop you. Go for it. Have fun with that. But the idea that that on its own is enough to overturn more or less all of science is laughably dumb. As to ordained to scene review for $9.99 says, who wants to tell Tom that young Earth creationists can be at universities without public ridicule, and even the pro-life and anti-vax canvassing at my university, which is more directly dangerous than young Earth creationism. Oh, I'm sorry about all that. That sounds terrible. Yeah. But that's the thing. So, evangelicals, as a big part of their worldview, want to be oppressed. And part of that is, Jesus saying the world will hate you. And another part of it is they are at least aware of some Christian history of the oppression of Christians historically. There's this, I think it's Fox's Book of Martyrs is a fairly popular book among young Earth, evangelicals and whatnot. So it seems like part of their self-identity is the idea that they are an oppressed group and that the world hates them. And so I think they just tend to default to people will ridicule you for being a Christian. Even though generally that's not really true. I mean, I can't say no one ever ridicules anyone for being a Christian. It definitely happens. But, like, being ridiculed because you're 750,000 times wrong about the age of the Earth, not the same thing as being ridiculed for being a Christian. Right? Like, no one's out there ridiculing, say, I don't know, Dr. Schweitzer for being a Christian. In part because she's not saying ridiculous things about the nature of the world that we know aren't true. Nether 6 Hair, who's been a member for 5 months and is at the tetrapod level, says AIG is an objective bag of dicks. Which, yes, they are. So yeah, this is just like persecution porn, right? Well, evangelicals love to feel like they're being persecuted, even though, as a demographic, they're one of the most powerful and politically connected groups that exists outside of, like, billionaires.
Instead of doing that,
Specifically in the United States. Just want to make that clear. They are not, that group of people is not politically well connected in every country, obviously.
she said, oh no, this will show I'm wrong, so I have to try to work against it.
Nope, that's not what she did. This is just lying about Dr. Schweitzer. It's really, really annoying. I really don't like it.
So in this, she tried to find a way to explain how it could last for millions of years.
Yes, because that is the far more likely result of finding soft tissue, is that something you didn't know about is going on. Right?
So she wrote down these 3 possibilities. To her credit, at least she listed number 1, the fossil might be young. Yeah, that's a real possibility. It should not be overlooked. Secondly, the soft tissue could just be biofilm, which she and other scientists already refuted. Thirdly, the one she liked, there might be a previously unknown preservation process. That's what she hung her hat on, because she didn't want to be proven wrong about the age of the fossils. Pride can lead to destruction and a haughty spirit to a fall.
Carver maybe says outside millionaires with the skull. Hey, look, if there's one thing that makes you politically well connected in basically any country, it's being one of the wealthy ones. Because you know what? Politicians are humans. They can be bribed. So, there you go.
Anyway, Also, in this little ditty, they say that soft tissue is just dust on the scales. It's just a little thing. Even if we can't explain it, it's no big deal because we have all this other evidence.
I mean, I wouldn't say it's no big deal, but you have to realize that when I say all of science, I really mean it. It's hard to find a part of science that would not have to be completely wrong in order for young Earth creationism to be true. Right? Just the fact that you can see stars in the sky, or sorry, that the stars that you can see in the sky are as far away as we know they are, just that fact on its own means that these soft tissues probably aren't compatible with young Earth creationism. Just the fact that the speed of light is a constant on its own means that this is the case. Everything we know about particle physics indicates that this can't be the case. Everything we know about geology indicates that it can't be young. It's everything. Nothing in the entire world of science makes these bones are young something that is compatible with reality. With the one exception, apparently, of finding the degraded remains of proteins in soft tissues. That's it. It really is all of science on one side of the scale, and then this guy's little pet thing about soft tissue on the other side of the scale. And of course, the side of the scale doesn't tip towards a young Earth.
As my DVDs point out there, all this other evidence is based largely on biased, bigoted assumptions.
Bigoted assumptions? That's a new one for me with young Earth creationists. I've never heard them call the assumptions behind things like radiometric dating bigoted. I don't entirely know what that means. Like, who is it bigoted against to say that the principles by which the universe operates do not vary over time? Yeah, Elephant says, but you're ignoring the possibility of magic. I'm specifically not, because this is science, where we don't have to worry. I guess that means I am ignoring it, right? I'm ignoring it specifically because it's science, right? Science does not allow magic in the door. Even if magic is real, science doesn't care. If you have some kind of like angel who can every once in a while on a whim come down and change a thing, great, cool. Not a matter for science, because science is about the predictable aspects of the universe, even when that predictability is just down to probabilities, right? You can say, well, it's not predictable when, say, a particular atom will decay into a lighter atom. For a particular atom, yeah, that's true. However, we can say things about aggregates of atoms and how long it will take for half of them to decay, say. Another Six Hair says, it's bigoted against the willfully ignorant. You know, okay, maybe that's what that is. Oh, and then Rana K says, it's probably a dog whistle for evolutionists. Dog whistle for evolutionists equal racists and eugenicists. Yeah, that could be. And I mean, to be fair, there have been lots of people who've attempted to justify racism and eugenicism via evolution. It's not a thing that's false. Of course, people have also tried to justify such things by use of Christianity, and I don't think that the fact that people have used something to justify their bad behavior means that that thing is on its own bad. Right? Like, I don't think that follows. Asta Ordained Essene Ryu says, it's bigoted assumption because he's persecuted. Stop being Stop being so Christophobic, Dapper. Yeah, no, I should stop hating all the Christians. Yeah, I should probably apologize to all my Christian co-hosts. Apparently I hate them so much. Arrgh.
That cannot be even proven true by the scientific method. A lot of bluff and bluster.
The scientific method never proves anything true, ever. Not once.
Something like Shakespeare said. Anyway, I won't get into that right now. We're going to run out of time. All right.
No, you won't. I got all day. I mean, I don't. But what I do mean is that actually, no matter how long this takes, I'm just going to pause it and come back next week. So who cares?
Yeah. So they're saying it's not anything to be concerned about, but now we have found it all over the world, all up and down the fossil record.
Okay. I don't follow this argument. Why does that make it worse? Right? If let's say you were worried about, say, I don't know, what's a good thing? It's some kind of bug, right? Like you're like, oh no, I'm scared of ants, and someone's like, no, look, ants are basically harmless, right? Sure, you can get them out of your house with some ant traps or whatever, but like the fact that ants exist in like a square mile or a mile radius of you, not something we're worried about. Oh no, but they're actually on like 6 of the 7 continents, and they're in basically every biome except for like extreme, like tundras or something. They're all over the place, and so what? They're just still not a problem. That there's more of not a problem doesn't suddenly make it a problem. What are you talking about, dude?
They say about 50% of the fossils that they've examined, that's a very high percentage, have this evidence.
That's going to be a citation needed, my dude, because I am unaware of anyone saying that. So it's certainly not the case that that 50% or so of like paleontology papers are reporting soft tissue in their finds. Yeah, I would love to know where that idea came from.
You add that up all across the world, all across the fossil record, it's enormous evidence. It can't be just mitigated by saying, oh, it's just some little gadfly.
You notice that he hasn't actually talked about iron cross-linking? The thing that actually has been determined as responsible for a lot of this preservation? Alright, here's what we're going to do. We're going to put a poll in the chat. Whether or not you think he's actually going to mention iron cross-linking. Will he mention iron cross-linking? I thought about putting in FE instead of iron, and then I put in a capital I because, I was already about to put in a capital F. So, good thing I didn't. Here we go. There's the poll. Will he mention iron cross-linking? Yes, no, and turtle. No is already taking a commanding lead with 100% of the votes. Oh, now it's 92%. Okay. Alex Markle says, ignoring the problem is how you get Planet of the Ants. Do you want Planet of the Ants? That reminds me, actually, what was it called? It was a book. Children of Time. Children of Time has a planet that almost becomes the Planet of the Ants. And that was a really fun book. I did read the second one in that, Children of Ruin, I want to say, which was also really good. So if you're looking for a cool speculative sci-fi involving things like what does it mean to be like intelligent and build a civilization, and what would it look like if a species with a very, very different psychology and biology to humans built a civilization, and just how humans deal with the other, as well as what would the human interaction with deep time be like if humans could actually directly experience deep time in the span of a regular human lifetime in terms of like little snippets. All of that's really cool. I would highly recommend Children of Time. It's a fun book, and it has almost ant world that happens. Also, if you want to hear about spider gender politics, it's all over the book. Spider gender politics, big thing in that book. So, yeah, Nether 6 Harris says, it's funny how young Earth creationists praise Mary Schweitzer when they are essentially accusing her of being a fraud, showing the tissue to be old. Yeah, I wonder if part of it is that they know that she's a Christian, and so they don't want to just say that she's an evil atheist or whatnot. Because one of the problems is Mary Schweitzer is really hard to fit into, like, sort of the worldview of most young Earth creationists. For most young Earth creationists, right, there's the God-fearing, good, young Earth creationist, Bible-believing, upright citizens of the world. And then there's the godless, atheist, depraved, degenerate evolutionists who believe in millions of years and molecules to man, goo to the zoo to you. And like, okay, but that's not what the world is actually like, right? Like, that does not describe most people in the world, either of those. And Mary Schweitzer is a very in-your-face example of why that idea about how the world works is just flatly wrong. Let's see. Mayral Randar, who's been a member for 11 months, is at the tetrapod level, says, and I don't know what to do with most of these diacriticals. AIG R and Possumedsvarsakar? I don't even know what to do with the R. But I know what you mean, because it's the only thing anyone ever means when they put AIG in a sentence in another language. So thank you very much. And yeah, no, I'm so sorry for butchering what is probably Swedish? I'm guessing Swedish. I don't know Swedish. Actually, don't even know very much German. A tiny little bit of German. Oddly enough, my two best Germanic languages are English and Old English, which is, yeah. Even then, my Old English is super rusty because I don't use it much.
Some little fly in the ointment. So first thing she did was cross out the fossil might be young. She didn't like that. And she crossed out biofilm, because that obviously couldn't be true. She circled the last one, there might be a previously unknown preservation process. So she thought, what could we do it? Well, we know that when we use tanning chemicals with cowhide, it causes what's known as cross-links.
Oh, he's right. Are we going to get to the iron cross-linking? Are 60% of my audience going to be wrong? This is actually kind of exciting.
This is where you have additional bonds forming between the amino acids and the proteins. Mm-hmm. Now, an average-sized protein for large animals like mammals and even lizards and dinosaurs, things like that, is about 400 amino acids on the average. If you imagine a long chain extending across the auditorium here, each link in that chain would be a chemical compound, one of 20 different alpha amino acids.
Harper maybe says, silly linguist, English isn't Germanic, it's English. I mean, I don't know what you mean by Germanic then, because, I mean, it's a language family, and English is very much a part of it.
Used in proteins. They're chemically composed to link head to tail, tail to head, and those links can break. They will spontaneously break over time by the second law of thermodynamics, the law of increasing disorder.
That's not what thermodynamics is. Thermodynamics does not say that chemicals just break down over time, right? The second law of thermodynamics is about entropy. Entropy can be defined in a number of ways, but one of the easiest to understand is the energy available in a system that can be used to do work, to displace mass over a certain period of time. What does that have to do with breaking down DNA? The answer is nothing. The second law of thermodynamics is fundamentally nothing to do with the breaking down of proteins over time. At best, you can say that because of the tendency to go towards lower energy states, that is, in fact, connected to the second law of thermodynamics, which I guess it is. But, like, chemical bonds don't just break automatically. Things tend to break them. That's why he invoked things like radiation.
And that is inexorable. It cannot be stopped. So there's no way to really get out of it.
So then what's up with the leather? Why do we have centuries-old leather that just seems like leather? Oh, wait. It actually can be stopped more or less indefinitely by sufficient cross-linking. Interesting. It's almost like there's a chemical process that can allow for this.
But she said, well, if we added some additional links, it would take longer to break down.
Yep.
Well, that's true, but we can't get anywhere near enough by any chemical process.
Says who? You. Just you. That's just an assertion. You need to back that up with something. What analysis was done to determine that, say, iron cross-linking, or like you're showing on screen, formaldehyde cross-linking, doesn't last long enough to preserve tiny remnants of soft tissue in a dinosaur bone? I'm not aware of any such study, even by young Earth creationists. All I'm aware of is just incredulity. All right, so here's what we're going to do. I'm going to take a quick break. I'm going to get myself another cup of coffee, and maybe I'll put some vanilla in there, because, like I said, this coffee tastes a little on the bland side. And we will be right back. Hopefully it won't take too long, especially since it's only me I'm waiting for. So I will see you on the other side of the break. Okay, I am back. Thank you very much for sticking with me, those of you who did, which looks like most people. I have myself a nice fresh cup of coffee, which is nice and hot again, because that last cup got a little bit lukewarm by the end. Because for some reason, Luke has the worst temperature. And yeah, a little bit of vanilla did pick it up just a little bit. Not a lot of vanilla, right? Just a little bit of vanilla. All right, so before we really get back into this, I want to say thank you to everyone who's supporting this channel. This channel is almost entirely supported directly by viewers. Very little of the channel funding comes in through ads or people watching videos that have YouTube Premium. And if you are someone who is currently not supporting, but you're interested in doing so, maybe you really like this content, you just want to chip in to help make sure it keeps going, one of the best ways is the Patreon. The Patreon starts at $1 a month. Can go all the way to 100 if you want. You can get a 15% discount if you go annual on there. It gets you access to a Discord server that's just for people who are patrons and channel members. You can get early access to dozens of videos. I try to make it as good a deal as possible, right? Because I recognize that, you know, I'm, in some cases, like at the $5 or the $10 tier or whatever, you're giving me as much as you might give, you know, like Disney Plus or Netflix or Amazon Prime or something. And so I have to make sure that I'm really giving you something in return for that, because your money is valuable. Time is valuable. Another option is, of course, the channel memberships. That starts at $1.99, can go all the way to $20 if you want. That is, there's a little join button right below this video. Patreon is linked in the description. That also gets you access to that same Discord server, as well as dozens of early access videos. Also gets you, you know, your name in green in the chat, as well as a little symbol next to your name. If that's not your thing, if you don't want to do an annual or a monthly pledge, there's also the merch store right below this video. There's a shelf with all sorts of merch. If you're interested in getting some merch, but you don't like what you see on that shelf, just click on an item. It'll take you to the merch store, and you can peruse a whole bunch of other stuff that's on there. If none of that is your deal, if you're not a big fan of that, there's also the Amazon wish list. That's basically, like you heard me say earlier today, you know, I got something from Anne Gladstone. And yeah, it basically just, it brightens my day for a while, you know? It's always fun to just get something, and like, even if it's just a fun little guy, like, you know, this plush facehugger. You know what? It makes me happy for a little bit. So if you ever just want to make me happy for a little bit, that is a great way to do it. And again, if you can't afford it, please do not pledge the Patreon, join the channel memberships, buy the merch. If you can't afford it, don't give me money. Only give me money if that's actually something that's in the budget for you. You and your family and their well-being take precedence. That being said, whether or not you can afford to support, there are free ways to help the channel out, and one of the biggest ones is by liking the video. Make sure you like my videos when you watch them. Share my videos around on social media. Put them on your Twitter, put them on your Blue Sky, your Facebook, your Instagram. I don't know. Any of those things. And then also, if possible, watch a few of my videos in a row. That really helps with the algorithm. And now we have Savage Pre-Yiddish Cobra has gifted 5 memberships to the Dapper Dinosaur channel. They went to Fragmag75, Alessandra Hedgeblog, John D, Kip Davis, and Fish Life Getting Down to Ernest Monger. Awesome. All right. Also, Tiri, I'm Dapper's GM. You may call me God Rana. Says Dapper Dinosaur's Discord server is pretty worth it. 10 out of 10. Would parasocial relationship again. Look, I try to actually make that server a fun place, right? There's a lot of channels for there's a meme dump, there's an art channel for posting your art. There's a number of TTRPG channels. If you want to get together a group, you can find a group there. There's general stuff. There's a channel that's just for venting and heavy stuff. That's, you know, a big deal and emotionally charged. If you want to go there. Ronna K says that I'm part of your mental health budget. Well, I'm glad that I'm helping with your mental health. So there is that. Although I do hope that you're also getting some help from someone who's trained to help with mental health, because I am not. And so I do hope that that is also part of your mental health budget. And if it's possible, if it's not part of your mental health budget and dropping me would help you get someone who can help you in a professional capacity, That would be my recommendation, is give a doctor money if you need a doctor before you give me money. But then again, I mean, look, I'm happy that I am improving people's lives. So here we go. More Tom. I'm just going to call him Tom because I'm tired of not knowing how to say his last name and just kind of guessing. Also, we're going to end the poll. Let's end this poll real quick. Because now I feel like it's sort of cheating now that he's about to talk about cross-linking. So, will he mention cross-linking? No, 49%. Turtle, 27%. And only 23% have faith that he will mention cross-linking. And that is with 81 votes. All right. Here we go.
Now, formaldehyde is a good example that probably you've been exposed to in high school or college, where they preserve organic specimens in a bottle or jar of formaldehyde, which is both a germicide to keep bacteria from forming in there, but it also does this cross-linking to make the tissue tough and to last longer. So she said, well, something like that maybe. Well, even if it was formaldehyde, it doesn't put enough extra bonds. It might put a couple dozen extra bonds in a protein that already has 400. And if those proteins break down, based on their Arrhenius equations and the actual experiments we have done, which have been done for decades now, that were done a lot back when we didn't have this evidence of the dinosaurs. Nobody knew about it. They did it on archaeological sites.
Okay, but here's the thing. Dr. Schweitzer did do experiments, right? The thing is, you can use different conditions to essentially simulate long periods of time. So, for instance, we know that things decay faster when there's more heat, right? Because, again, more heat means it's more likely for you to end up being able to drop into those lower energy states. So, she did the experiment. She didn't just come up with something and then just say, well, I guess that's it. But, Lance's Fossil Corner says he sounds like the dude that took over for Art Bell. Yeah, a little bit. I can see that. He's definitely got a voice that I think would do well in radio, right? He's got that sort of, that deep, able to sort of like be resonant, masculine voice that works really well for a lot of male, like radio announcers and whatnot, radio hosts. Yeah.
Where the bones of man or the bones of animals buried at those archaeological sites were assumed to be no more than several thousand years old at the most. And things just several thousand years old could have intact proteins. No problem.
Okay. These dinosaurs don't have intact proteins, so again, no problems. Also, the cross-linking means it's not intact, so things in formaldehyde don't have intact proteins. I'm not even really sure at this point what his internal conceptualization of soft tissue preservation is. And Sydney Raptor, you're correct. I mentioned it a little while ago. Well, actually, I mean, right at the beginning. But yeah, they've never found intact full proteins. It's always protein fragments. And sure, they retain some of the chemical properties of the proteins, right? Like elastin fragments remain somewhat stretchy. Okay.
Then they found it in dinosaurs and other things. Then it's a problem, because then it should not exist. Anyway, so you had a few extra bonds, as you can see here on the right. Not going to make any significant difference.
I mean, it will, though. That's the thing. Those are additional bonds that need to break in order for this thing to become unrecognizable and no longer be recognizably a protein fragment. Right? That's the thing that preserves proteins as protein fragments that are recognizable in terms of where they came from. You can't just say, well, that's not going to make a difference, when it's the thing that makes the difference, period.
These break down by the hundreds in just tens of thousands of years, the actual experimental data predicts, so adding a few extra is simply insignificant.
It's not, though. Every single one that you do adds to the expected lifetime of this protein fragment. Every single one. I also want to point out that this video that he's using for his slides is the Stated Clearly video. And that's run by a guy named John. And John interviewed Dr. Schweitzer, right? He talked to her. This that he's critiquing from Dr. Schweitzer is from Dr. Schweitzer, ultimately. Now, granted, it was put through, a bunch of cool animation, because that's what Stated Clearly does, right? John does a whole bunch of really cool science education animations. A lot of them aimed towards, like, school kids, because the format lends itself to that. But, like, this is from Dr. Schweitzer. If he wants to use Dr. Schweitzer's work to basically support young Earth creationism, he has to contend with the fact that she did her own experiments and found that, yes, her mechanism of iron cross-linking was able to preserve protein fragments more or less indefinitely under simulated long periods of time. So, yeah.
Now, in her desperation, she was looking for what could be used as a cross-reaction agent. She said, oh, I see these little red particles in the blood vessels. She looked closer and said, oh, these appear to be iron crystals. There's iron there. And so she said, Eureka! There's the answer. Because
just like in the Greek legend, shouts Eureka, leaps out of the bath and runs through the streets.
according to her, iron is a powerful cross-link agent. Now,
I mean, it demonstrably is. It's not just according to her. It's according to multiple experiments that we've used to determine whether or not iron can cross-link proteins. Turns out it can. And you know what's very prevalent in a lot of the things that he's been talking about, like blood vessels and red blood cells and things that have blood in them? Yeah, it's iron. It's iron. So apparently, though, the 23% or so of you who said that he wouldn't talk about iron cross-linking, including me, I was one of them, we're just wrong. So you know what? At least props to Tom for getting to the point where we're going to talk about iron cross-linking, because I honestly thought we wouldn't get there. Pillowpunk, half dog, half canine for $5 says, I will send this super chat if he mentions iron cross-linking. And then he did. So thank you very much, Pillowpunk.
Weider's histology, which is like the definitive authoritative textbook on the subject, says it isn't, but she seems to think.
I mean, okay, great. Some textbook is wrong based on experiment. Because here's the thing, right? If experiment says you're wrong, unless you can find a flaw in the experiment, then you're just wrong. I don't care what some old textbook says. The experiment is what matters. It's the data that matters. You don't get to just say, well, science isn't allowed to adapt to new data. No, that's the entire point of science. This is just the same old creationist canard of, why is science? Why would science change to align itself with the evidence? Yeah, because that's the point of science. That's why science works. Because we get less wrong about the world, which means our predictions about future data get better because we're less wrong.
Think that it is. Everybody would have to agree it's not nearly as effective at cross-linking as aldehyde solutions, such as formaldehyde.
I don't know if that's true or not. I also don't know why it matters. The fact that these things weren't cross-linked by the chemically ideal cross-linking agent doesn't mean that isn't what happened. And it doesn't mean that cross-linking cannot extend the shelf life of protein fragments, which it demonstrably can and does. I just don't get it, right? It's the same argument as, like, why would you bake a potato with a solar oven when you could bake it faster in the microwave? Okay, that's great, but I still cooked it in the solar oven. Like, what do you want from me? The fact that it could have been done more effectively some other way doesn't matter. It's completely irrelevant.
But she's desperate, so her observations, therefore, she wrote down, was that iron cross-links proteins, maybe in a very rudimentary way.
No, in a pretty conclusive, very effective way. It does. Just saying, well, the experiments indicate that iron cross-linking can preserve at least fragments of proteins more or less indefinitely. Sorry.
But not very well, and certainly not as good as formaldehyde, which even if it did, would not be anywhere near enough. Secondly, she says cross-linked proteins are extremely durable. Not on the time scale we're looking at.
You're wrong.
Millions of years, not even close. Thirdly, she said iron is found in blood cells. Well, we can't dispute that. It's in the hemoglobin. And, well, I guess
it's found in more than that, but that is a very prominent place that it's found. So
we disappeared. You know what happens when we have technical difficulties. Punishment shall ensue. Okay?
Maybe this is actually God telling him to stop because he's being really, really dumb. And God doesn't want to be represented by this guy. So God just turned off the projector. I guess he didn't turn it off. I guess he unplugged his signal source. Because, yeah, now it says check source. So, okay. Or, well, check input signal, but you know what I mean. Nathaniel Nucleotizer Jeans Gray for $2 says, is it time to call him a liar yet? It's certainly trending that way, right? I don't know, though, because he's clearly not educated in this topic. So, And I'll be honest, pop sci reporting on this topic has been kind of abysmal. So I don't know. The thing is, I'm much more likely to suspect dishonesty if someone is educated in a particular field, right? Like if this had been, I don't know, any of the young Earth creationists, like, what's that guy's name? Matt McLean. Like if this were a Matt McLean lecture, then yeah, this would be Matt McLean lying. But he's not Matt McLean, right? He's not a paleontologist. He's not a chemist. He's not a biochemist. He's not a geneticist. He's just some guy with like a divinity degree. So I don't know if he's lying. He's certainly not well sourced, but that's not the same thing.
Okay. Check TX's input signal. Who's TX?
I was gonna say that was like the most awkward water drinking. Like, yeah, you don't need to make those weird groany noises because you're drinking water. Just not. You don't have to. Just drink the water like a normal person.
Better hope your name is written in heaven, because it's written here, and this is not a good place.
Okay. Skip ahead a little bit.
That Jesus owned two died
Selling jokes.
from a foot ailment. I figured. Okay.
So I didn't show it last time, and I'm skipping past it now. But this guy likes to open his talks with a bunch of pun-based jokes about the Bible. And, like, okay. Great.
And how do we know that Job was always cold in his bed at
doing
night?
it again.
Ah, there we go. Guess you'll never find out.
That's fine by me.
No, I will not punish you that badly.
What
You
got
won't
for
never
us?
find out. It'll just be till next year.
Jeez, dude, just get on with it. Vandalion 1998 for $5 says, if you want to learn real info about dinos and their family, I have a poll on my channel for at Dr. Dino and my next episode in June. Okay, well there you go. You find out what those two are going to talk about.
Okay, no, I'm just kidding. I figured Job must have been cold in his bed at night. After all, the Bible says he had such miserable comforters. Oh, okay.
Now I wish I did have a bunch of whiskey.
Anyway, got to get going here. So, the fourth point down, iron is released from blood cells as they decay.
It's true.
An idea that is disproved by her own photographs, as we shall see.
No, it's not. But, okay, I don't even know what photo... Because we've already seen her photographs. So I don't know what is going to be disproving this, but okay.
The red blood cells are intact. The cell membrane is intact. The iron in the hemoglobin is still excluded within the membrane of the red blood cells.
None of that is true. First, Mary Schweitzer does not even say that she has the level of evidence to say that those are, in fact, preserved red blood cells. They're just consistent with what we would expect for preserved blood cells. Further, they do not have intact membranes. We don't even know that they have cell membranes that are actually made of, like phospholipid bilayers at all. And while there is a localization of iron in them, that does not mean that none of the iron that was originally in whatever those things were originally got out. At every point of that, he was just wrong. Now, I don't know that he was lying, but being that wrong about it, it's hard to say. And also, I got to point out, what he's essentially doing is basically saying that Mary Schweitzer is just dumb. Because if her own photographs disprove her own contention, what other conclusion can you draw from that, other than that she's really bad at her work, or she's the one who's lying? Which means you better have some really good evidence to back that up, because, that's the kind of thing that should go in the literature. If you think that Mary Schweitzer is internally contradictory with her own papers, put that in a paper and submit it for publication. You don't need a degree. You don't need any kind of qualifications. There's not even an age requirement. Just publish it. They're not even going to ask if you're a young Earth creationist.
It has to get out to saturate the tissue to preserve it. But after 70 and 80 million years plus, it's still in the red blood cells. So how does it
We don't know that it's in the red blood cells because we don't even know that we have red blood cells.
get out and cause the tissue to last so long? Very good question. Her own photographs disprove her hypothesis. Fifthly, soft tissue in dinosaur bones is saturated with iron, not all of it. We found it where there's virtually none, the tiniest trace, not enough to do anything.
Ooh, I think he's talking about Mark Armitage, because that's the only real creationist I know of who's been reporting significant amounts of soft tissue finds. And if that's what he means, because I mean, right now I don't even know, I can't say for certain what he's even talking about to make a response. But if that's what he means, yeah, we're going to have some things to talk about when it comes to Mark Armitage. Because Mark is, he is really bad at his job. Or at least his job when it comes to paleontology. I can say that at least. I can't say for certain that he's dishonest, because, you know, he's not a trained paleontologist. But he's a really bad paleontologist. I can say that for sure.
And when she was told about that, this is hearsay, I haven't checked it out in writing, but from what I heard, she said, well, I guess it's back to the drawing board.
Oh, you didn't actually check it out in the literature? You didn't do the one thing that's necessary to actually be informed on this topic? Oh my goodness, how surprising! Wow, who could have ever guessed this guy didn't actually check on what nonsense he was spewing? Yeah, I'm now much more inclined to say he's being deceptive. Because if you want to say this stuff, it behooves you to at least check, right? Just do a literature search. Just do that thing. That's why I call Michael Behe a liar, right? Because when he was on trial, well, not he was on trial, but when he was a witness in the Kitzmiller versus Dover trial over intelligent design, and he said that, yeah, he wasn't aware of any research about the evolution of the flagellar motor. And then the opposing attorney produced a gigantic stack of printouts of papers all about the evolution of the flagellar motor. And he said, well, I just didn't see these. And they were all dated from before he wrote his book. Yeah, that's because Michael Behe just didn't do a literature search and said that he did by saying, well, there's no literature that says that actually explains this. When you say there's no literature that explains this, or there's no explanation for this, it means you checked, right? So, yeah, I'm leaning much more towards this guy as just being a liar. Now, he might not think of himself that way, but he's certainly implying things that aren't true, and it's hard to see how he's not trying to trick people into thinking that they're true. Like that he did a literature search.
Because that's the only hypothesis they have, is the iron somehow miraculously allows these things to last for millions of years.
I wonder which part of cross-linking is a miracle. I mean, that's what he's saying, right? It's a miracle that iron cross-links proteins, even though we know it does, and we understand the chemistry reasonably well. I'm curious which part of that is a miracle.
Our hypothesis at the bottom is that iron from blood helped preserve dinosaur tissue for millions of years.
Oh, Liz D says that I thought it was the evolution of the blood clotting cascade, not the flagellar motor. You know, you might be right about that. I would have to double check. If it is the flagellar motor, or sorry, the blood clotting cascade, then I apologize. If someone could check on that, double check me on that. Was it the flagellar motor or the blood clotting cascade that was the thing that was produced with a stack of papers? Because it's been a very long time since I read any of those transcripts, and I am working, because I'm live, I'm working almost entirely from memory. So, if anyone could double check on that, that would be great.
He did an experiment that lasted a whole 2 years.
Yeah, but it was simulating much more time, because again, we know what things accelerate processes that cause, proteins to decay, and we can just accelerate those. Jillian, married to DNA Ren, for $5 says, my favorite part of the Behe thing is that the lawyers admit they got it from the Miracle on 34th Street. Oh my goodness, really? Oh, and apparently that's your 5th super chat. Thank you very much. That seems hard to fathom that you've only super chatted 5 times, but okay. That is... I hope that's true. I've never heard that, and that is amazing. That is... You mean like the bit where they dump all the letters to Santa? Is that the scene that we're talking about? I like the Miracle on 34th Street. Although I'm a bit of a snob, so I like the original one, not the remake. Get out of here with this remake. Although I say that, but there are remakes that I like more than the original. Like the version of the Maltese Falcon that I think is one of the best movies ever made is a remake. So,
Very artificially done. She artificially lysed the red blood cells. In other words,
it's a very artificially done experiment. Yeah, man, that's how experiments work. What? Okay, creationists say that they love science and that they are really a big fan of things like laboratory science that lets us determine how to make computers and build rockets and cool stuff like that. But then when it comes to actual experiments that show that, oh, wait, no, the things you think about the world are wrong, suddenly, oh, well, that's just an artificial experiment. You had to actually design that, and you had to do things that don't happen in nature to get that done. Yeah, man, that's what an experiment is. Do you like experiments? Do you think experiments are valid, or do you not? Pick a lane, young Earth creationists. Either yes, experiments good, or no, experiments bad. Just the fact that it's an artificial setup that is unlikely to occur in nature isn't a valid criticism. In fact, it's kind of the point of an experiment, because nature is messy, and experiments need to be as neat and tidy as possible so that you know that the effect that you're looking at is reasonably caused by the variable under investigation. Right? That's why you try to eliminate as many extraneous variables as possible. Jillian Mary to DNA Ren said, they said it on the Nova special, yeah, it was the letters to Santa. Awesome. I don't even know if I've seen the Nova special. If anyone has a link to the Nova special, please send it to me. Send it on, like, I don't know, Discord or something like that. Because I would be interested, because I don't think I've seen it. So, Fear Pre-Yiddish Monger says the remake of Dune far better than the original adaptation. I mean, it's definitely a better movie overall, but I do have a nostalgic soft spot for that movie. Especially with, like, the absurdly long intro with Princess Irulan just kind of staring blankly at the camera talking about the history of the Dune universe. And of course, the Dune remake does not have Sting in a Speedo, so, you know. It was certainly a choice.
Artificially broke open those membranes to get the hemoglobin and the iron out.
You mean the thing that we have no reason to think didn't happen in the dinosaur bones? Yeah, exactly. Because remember, when he says that there were intact, perfectly preserved red blood cells complete with intact membranes, he's wrong.
Then she used biofilters and centrifuges to super saturate it, super concentrate it, which would never have happened in a dinosaur bone. And she put...
Nathaniel, iron cross-linking doesn't work, Gray. It's amazing how fast you guys pick up on great things to change your names to. For $2, it says, the absolute gall of calling Dr. Schweitzer a fraud. Yeah, I really do not like how Dr. Schweitzer's co-religionists have been treating her for decades now. It's really, really, really not okay. And I mean, look, she's obviously her own accomplished scientist who can defend herself, right? She doesn't need me to come to rushing to her defense. But it's still really, really gross to me the way that she's treated by a lot of other Christians. I don't think that it's particularly charitable. I don't think it's particularly honest. And quite frankly, I don't think it corresponds very well to the person of Jesus as portrayed in the, canonical Gospels. And while there are certainly things that are contradictory in the canonical Gospels, and Jesus isn't completely consistently characterized in them, there's still some broad character traits that you can very easily draw from them. And lying about the scientific work of some woman to help you contradict everything we know about reality doesn't seem like one of the things that you can easily draw as in the character of Jesus as portrayed in the Gospels. Putting that out there.
Material in it for 2 years and said, there we go. It didn't appear to degrade, so it will last for millions of years. Very, very artificial. 2 other scientists, one evolutionist, one creationist, tried to do the same experiment, did not get the same results. They saw degradation. So that's a big red flag in science. If other scientists do the same experiment, don't get the same result, that does not speak well. Anyway.
I mean, he's right, but the thing is, other people have done similar experiments, and while the results aren't always consistent, there are, in fact, repeats of the experiment that seem to indicate that, yeah, iron cross-linking does seem to very significantly extend the likely lifetime of these proteins. And granted, you don't have probably even decades to do this experiment. If you want to do a protein cross-linking experiment and set it up for centuries to come, be my guest. But in terms of publications now, you're not going to have those results. We're going to have to rely on shorter term tests. So, I don't know.
It's all they've got, so that's what they hang their hat on. Now, here again, we have Mark Armitage, who is...
Yes! Come on, Mark. Let's see what you got. Oh, Mark. I'm hoping we get into his Triceratops, because boy, do I love to dunk on Mark Armitage and his probably not Triceratops.
Professional microscopy expert using microscopes to examine biological tissues.
Note that what that means he's not is a paleontologist. He is not someone who is an expert at digging up dinosaur bones, making sure that they're not contaminated. He's not an expert at the identification of paleotaxa. He's not an expert at site preservation for paleontology digs. None of these things.
And he says, can iron really preserve soft tissues over millions of years? This is on YouTube. You can look it up. And he's holding in his hand Wheater's functional histology. He said, man, if it's so good at doing that, it would be better than formaldehyde. It'd be listed in the top tier. It's not listed at all.
I mean, it sounds like it's actually kind of a pain in the butt to get it to do that. So, like, because remember, Mary Schweitzer's experiment in the iron cross-linking was a whole involved process. It wasn't like she just dumped a bunch of iron shavings in a vat of, like, I don't know, blood or something, and then just waited a few years to see how long it took for the proteins to decay. She did a lot of work to get to that point. And, like, that compared to just, like, toss it in some formaldehyde, obviously formaldehyde, even if it were less effective on, like, a molecule-by-molecule basis at preserving proteins, it would still be the obvious preferred method. I mean, who cares if you preserve something for the next 60 million years? No one is working on those timescales. When you dunk something in formaldehyde, it's so that it works for, like, you know, next few decades, next century or two. And it's probably going to work for millennia. But that fact isn't really what you're concerned with. No one really does something for the next 1,000 years of benefit, right? Like, no one's going to be watching this video in 1,000 years. I would be surprised if, like, 10 years from now, people are still watching this video. But that's okay, because I'm operating on a timescale of, you know, months and years, not decades and centuries, or even millennia, or millions of years. And that's fine. Got a couple things here. Crusher the Croxagore, who's been a member for 3 months and is at the Tetrapod level, says, could we do a Nova watch parties in the Dapper Court? We could. I'm not opposed to this. We probably want to pick a day, and I don't think I want to replace the normal after stream stuff with that, because it's a little bit too on topic. Because after streams, I want to wind down from being, you know, on topic. But we could certainly pick a day and watch the Nova special about the Kitzmiller v. Dover trial. I'd be down with that. And then Savage Pre-Yiddish Cobra for $5 says, that prestigious peer-reviewed journal, YouTube. Exactly.
In this definitive textbook.
Ooh.
So he says, Mary Schweitzer's blowing.
There's no such thing as a definitive textbook. You know how I know? Because there's no such thing as definitiveness in science. Science is always contingent. We always learn more. When we learn more, we find out that previous ideas were a bit off, and so we revise those ideas. And those ideas that are now revised make it into textbooks. You can have a definitive edition of, like, a novel or a video game or a movie or something, right? Something that does not have to correspond to reality. But that's not what a textbook is. The only way you could have a definitive textbook is if it's a textbook about something fictional written by the author of the fictional thing, right? So, like, J.R.R. Tolkien could have written the definitive textbook on elven linguistics, right? Because he's the only one who gets to decide what's true or not about that. And if he decides that this is true forever, from now and forever about elven linguistics in his Middle-earth, then that's just the way it is. But that's not how science is. Science has to deal with the real world. The real world is messy, and it's uncertain, and we can never get to 100% certainty about anything. Therefore, there is no such thing as a definitive textbook.
A lot of smoke there. There's no good evidence that it has any significant cross-linking capability, as much as you might like it to be so.
I mean, you know, except for the experiments. So, kind of a big deal in science, experiments, you know.
So, again, her own photographs. Notice what we see there, red blood cell.
Okay, that's what you see. But when Dr. Schweitzer saw that, it's not what she saw. Now, granted, she did say that it was morphologically consistent with a red blood cell. But she does not actually have the evidence to say that it's a red blood cell. It could be something else. It could actually just be a localization of iron in that blood vessel that is not associated with a red blood cell. And even if it is a red blood cell, it's not an intact red blood cell, because we know that the phospholipid bilayer is gone. There's a reason that he didn't mention phospholipids in his list of things that we found intact in dinosaur bones. Also, Lance's Fossil Corner for $10 says, in 3024, my head in a jar will be watching Dapper Dino videos. Well, thank you very much, Lance's Fossil Corner. I hope that you enjoy your stay in the the Head Museum, along with, like all the presidents and the crew of the original Star Trek. Or the cast of the original Star Trek. Plus, perhaps, Welshie. Don't forget Welshie.
It's still intact. The red in there is the iron in the hemoglobin. It's still surrounded by that cell membrane. It's still segregated.
You don't have the data to back that up. And neither does Dr. Schweitzer, which is why she doesn't make that claim. This is just looks like, right? Him saying that is actually not much better than when Roger from Mud Fossil University says that, like, the entire eastern seaboard of the United States is the body of a giant feathery serpent. Why does he say that? Well, because he thinks he can see it in there. He thinks that the Appalachian Mountains are actually just giant feathers and that they're in a snake-like fashion, and that, like, the Mississippi kind of looks like a serpent's head if you turn it sideways and look at it funny. Great. That's cool. Doesn't mean anything. And that's why Dr. Schweitzer doesn't say that these are definitively blood cells. Because looking like a blood cell isn't enough. Anytime someone tries to convince you that something is something else because it just kind of looks like it, that is not someone you should take seriously. There's no face on Mars, even though it kind of looks like there is. North America isn't made up of the bodies of giant dragons and scorpions, even though to at least one man it kind of looks like it is. Various mounds of rock in the Grand Canyon aren't Egyptian pyramids, even though there are people who think that they look like it. Various stone arches aren't actually elephants that are turned to stone, even though they kind of look like it. Sorry, but looks like is just not a good reason to believe anything.
You can see these little red blood cells here and there. Again, they haven't lysed, they haven't opened up and released the iron.
Says you, but I don't know that you could assess that. And I know that you can't, actually, because even the people who are making the claims about this don't actually claim that these are red blood cells, lysed or not.
Here we have it again, nucleated red blood cells in the blood vessel, still intact. And the definitive picture of her own, again, showing them still intact. Now, this is supposed to be 70 million years old. If it doesn't open after 70 million years, it doesn't open soon enough to do any good. And her own photographs prove this. I mean, I don't know.
Saying it over and over again neither makes your argument stronger or weaker. So I don't know why he's doing this. Just move on.
If she wants to insult our intelligence or think we were born yesterday, but any child can look at that and say, hey.
Was that just the imputation of malicious motives to Dr. Schweitzer? That's what it sounds like. Now, to be fair, I do sometimes, impute malicious motivations onto young Earth creationists, but I feel like I at least back that up reasonably well.
The iron is still segregated within the red blood cells. How's it supposed to preserve all that tissue?
First of all, it's not segregated because we found iron in the rest of the tissue. What you're looking at is localized higher concentrations. So, think about it this way. Let's say that you are eating some rice, and you put some salt on your rice unevenly. So you get to one bite of rice that's super salty and kind of gross. You don't like that. Okay. Does that mean that because you found a concentration of salt in your rice, that the rest of the rice is unsalted? No. That's not what that means. So, finding local concentrations of iron is not the same thing as there not being iron elsewhere. So, yeah. Mayral Randar said, that sounded like malicious sexism too. I don't want to accuse him of being sexist if I don't have good evidence of it. And I don't think that just the fact that she's a woman and that he thinks that she might be acting in bad faith is on its own sexism, right? Because it's not sexism to think that some women are horrible, right? Some women are horrible. So I don't know that I'm going to say that it's sexism yet. Now, of course, being a fundamentalist evangelical Christian, the chances that he's not sexist seem to be fairly low. But I'm not going to say that was necessarily an instance of sexism. Pillowpunk, half dog, half canine for $5 says, The opinions of 5-year-olds, the young Earth creationists' highest standard of evidence. Yeah, right? You can just ask a 5-year-old. Yeah, okay, you could. You could also just, not do that.
Good question. Does anybody know the name of this fellow? Dr. Hugh Ross,
Yep.
PhD in astronomy. He is the head of a ministry called Reasons to Believe Ministries.
He sure is, an old Earth creationist ministry that is... It's like the only old Earth ministry that I can really think of that takes the, progressive creation that's, carrying that forward. Even, the Discovery Institute, they play kind of fast and loose with the whole common ancestry thing. And you can find guys on there that are fine with even chimpanzee human ancestry. You can even find guys who are like, maybe eukaryote common ancestry is okay. I don't know. So yeah, it's really the only flag bearer that I can think of that is still carrying the torch for old Earth creationism in that sense of also rejecting common ancestry to any significant degree.
But it's Reasons to Believe primarily the New Testament and not the first 11 chapters of Genesis.
Oh no, he has a different interpretation of the historical aspects of the first few chapters of Genesis. Whatever shall we do?
He allegorizes that. He says the days were actually billions of years long. And he says God created over billions of years until he actually created creatures that looked like modern man, called hominids. And they had control of fire, they made jewelry, they made sophisticated stone tools.
Yeah, actually, this is a weird part of the Reasons to Believe thing, right? Because Reasons to Believe will say that, even Neanderthals weren't, humans in the sense of, made in the image of God. And I had to start to wonder, what is the image of God at that point, right? Because normally, there's two interpretations that I'm familiar with in Christianity, right? There's the physical thing, right? Where, humans are just physically the image of God. At which point I have to wonder, well, then why is God a weird, sweaty, naked monkey? But whatever, I guess. That's actually not the typical one that I am most familiar with. Usually what I hear is that the image of God has to do with things like creative and moral capacity that humans have as part of their, intellectual life, right? Humans have the ability to think deeply about things like morality and logic and nature, and they have the ability to do things like create art and music and, in those sort of ways, imitate God, who is, under this conception, also able to create and to have, a moral framework. And to me, that makes a whole lot more sense than just God physically being a hairless, sweaty monkey. But with Reasons to Believe, it seems like it's neither, right? Because if it's just physically, then I would argue that, things like Neanderthals are physically very similar to humans. So if humans are physically in the image of God, then Neanderthals would be too. But then if you're going to say that it's also not like the creative or moral capacity, then what about the fact that Neanderthals seem to have had some level of at least creative capacity? Maybe they were all jerks or something. It's just the moral capacity. I don't know. But that seems unlikely because being that antisocial is not really a good setup for a, very social species, which we know Neanderthals were. And also, Buzz Alrana, who works for Reasons to Believe, has stated that human Neanderthal mating events were, in his words, bestiality, which I don't think I would agree with that. So yeah, I don't. It's a very weird thing that Reasons to Believe does with the hominins, and they still use the word hominid to refer to just hominins, even though hominid is the family that also includes gorillas and chimpanzees and orangutans and humans. But I'm not going to nitpick too much because that terminology was current in the 90s. So, they're only, 20-something years behind on their terminology. It's pretty good for creationists.
But they had no soul, therefore they had no salvation. Then God allowed them to go extinct, and then he created Adam and Eve.
How do you tell if they don't have a soul? I guess that's just something they've decided because it makes the rest of their ideas easier to deal with. But yeah, I don't know. It seems weird to me. I feel like if Homo sapiens have a soul, then Neanderthals probably would have had one too. I just don't know on what basis you draw that distinction, other than that it makes it easier for your other doctrines. It's actually one of my biggest pet peeves with Reasons to Believe is their weirdness about other hominins besides Homo sapiens.
I don't think he got that idea out of reading Genesis. I think he got it somewhere else.
I mean, obviously, but then again, dude, you didn't get the idea of like cross-linking from Genesis. You didn't get the idea of a post-flood ice age from Genesis. You didn't get the idea. There's so many ideas in Earth creations you didn't get from Genesis. You did not even get the idea of kinds as the basic unit of creation from Genesis. None of that is in Genesis. All of that is stuff that you've imported into Genesis from outside. Like,
But the point is, he believes strongly in an old earth and an old fossil record, even though he professes to be an evangelical Christian, instead of saying, hey, this gets rid of our main nemesis, the lie of evolution, which so many have used to poo-poo the Bible and to believe in atheism and reject God. Instead of embracing it, he said, we got to argue against this. So he said, if a sample is isolated from any exposure to bacteria and oxygen, two things, then...
Yep, those are very important to preserve from, because those are both things that really, really, really like to break down biomolecules.
The soft tissue evidence easily can be preserved for over 100 million years. Well, saying it don't make it so. Can you point to experiments?
Yes, he can. In fact, the Reasons to Believe actually published a pretty well-regarded book called Dinosaur Soft Tissues in the Age of the Earth, I believe is the title. Please someone double-check me on that. And it's actually a really good overview of the soft tissue like data, as well as preservation mechanisms, and just sort of the state of the field when it was written. And it argues, I would say persuasively, against the idea that this, in fact, should indicate their young age. And remember, the reason that Hugh Ross primarily is an old Earth creationist is that he's an astronomer. He knows too much about the universe as a whole to think that the universe is only 6,000 years old. Because his work involves looking at things from billions of light years away. Things that he knows don't make sense if the universe is only 6,000 years old, because then you couldn't see them. So, yeah, Hugh Ross is not actually all that concerned with geology and paleontology, but he does notice that those things confirm the great age of the universe that he sees when he looks into the sky to do his astronomy work.
We have experiments that have been done over decades by real authorities who are evolutionists. And they have said otherwise, as we shall look at later. They actually have the experimental data.
Oh, well, I look forward to hearing that when we get there. Although I don't think it's going to be today, because we're pretty close to wrapping up here.
He says, there's only two things that would do it, and if they are excluded, then it will last. Well, he might be forgiven for being ignorant because he's an astronomer, not a molecular biologist. However, his colleague there at Reasons to Believe Ministries is Dr. Fazl Rana. My hat's off to him. He actually was raised as a Muslim and was able to come by the grace of God to faith in Jesus Christ.
Actually, don't know if he was raised as a Muslim. I mean, I'm not contesting it. I just don't know if that's true or not. Okay.
But he also believes in an old Earth, and his PhD is in biochemistry, right in this field. So he knows a little bit more than Hugh Ross, and he said it this way in his book. He said, yeah, there's down...
Oh, hey. Okay, so that's the title of the book I was talking about. I don't know how I feel about the fact that every time I talk about something, this guy seems to be like about to talk about it right after me, but then also tends to, misrepresent it. But yeah, apparently it's dinosaur blood and the age of the Earth. Fair enough.
Dinosaur blood and things like that, but you have to understand, under the right conditions, things can last for millions of years. Now, how many conditions do we have to deal with? Anybody remember? 5. How many does he list? Hugh Ross only listed 2. He lists 3. He said collagen, or at least fragments of it. Collagen, by the way, bone collagen is perhaps the strongest, at least among the very strongest proteins that exist. They always want to talk about that because they figure it would last longest. But
I mean, it's also one of the proteins that has been preserved the best in these fossils. Because remember, whenever he says this protein won't last, he's right. None of these proteins have lasted 68 million years. Not a one of them. Because we don't find the intact proteins. We find protein fossils. Broken up bits of protein that it's obvious where they came from, but that are not the protein in its original state.
all the other proteins are about 1/3 that strength and will only last 1/3 of the time.
How is he quantifying this? Like half-life under certain conditions? Is it like physical pulling apart strength? Like is it tensile strength or something? That's one of the things that bugs me about creationists is they like to just spout numbers that don't correspond to anything, at least not obviously. I guess that's not just creationist that bugs me about, because it happens in a lot of pseudoscience stuff, right? People just say, well, this is 5 times as much this as something else. And it's like, what does any of that mean? Don't worry about it.
But
so Cognitive Trifurcation says Rana's father was a devout Muslim, but Fuzz himself grew up as an agnostic despite pressure. Okay. Alright. That's interesting. I don't know much about the biography of Fuzz Rana. So yeah. I have no idea.
he says collagen, or at least fragments of it, could survive 68 million years in an environment devoid of water, oxygen, and microbes, given its structure. He lists 3 things. What about thermodynamic decay, which is inexorable and cannot be stopped?
That's the thing, though. What about it? It doesn't actually mean anything. You can't just say thermodynamic decay and then just leave it at that. What do you mean by that? Chemical changes are not usually completely actually spontaneous. They're usually in response to something, right? Whether it be radiation, whether it be chemical reactions with other chemicals, things like that. Nuclear reactions, those can be spontaneous, but they then cause a chemical reaction. If the nuclear reaction happens in an atom that is part of a larger biomolecule, or just any other molecule. Like, you don't just say, second law of thermodynamics, therefore this chemical can't last 68 million years. That doesn't mean anything. That's not an explanation. And also, I mean, I'm very confident this guy doesn't actually know what the second law of thermodynamics is. So, like, yeah, it doesn't mean anything. And as far as what about radiation, what about it? There's a reason that these things are protein fragments and not whole proteins. Radiation is part of that reason.
Didn't even mention it. You think he doesn't know it? PhD in biochemistry?
No, he probably knows about radiation. He probably knows that that's one of the reasons why they're not completely intact.
Studied thermodynamics. Study that in undergraduate school, for crying out loud. What about ground radiation? Think he's unaware of that? I can prove later that he knows about it, but he wouldn't mention it.
I mean, how do you know he's aware of it if he didn't mention it? Do you mean he didn't mention it in that book? I mean, that would be a significant oversight, I'd say, if he didn't mention it in that book. So, I don't know, maybe. But hey, we are about ready to wrap this up, everybody. So let's take a look at what is coming up on the channel. So, on Tuesday, we are doing Kent with Bent number, I believe it is 137? I'll double check, though. Let's see. Yep, 137. Kentimus, which is based on Agamus, which is the last Star Trek Jeffrey Combs role that we have not made a thumbnail based on. In case you're wondering, Agamus is a character from Star Trek Lower Decks. Check that out. So that will be on Tuesday at, let's see, 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern. Then on Thursday, we have the Creepy Carl Supercut. Creepy Carl the movie. That will be starting at noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern. That one, I believe, is a bit over, I think it's under 4 hours, but not by a whole lot. So, bring a snack, bring a drink, Then on Saturday, I plan to just continue with more of this. Hopefully, I can get a guest on. Kind of had a whole lot of people fall through today, but that's okay. I think we did pretty well, just me and the audience here. So that is what is happening on Saturday. And then, of course, next Tuesday should ideally be Matt with Maddie. I will have to double check with Maddie, but I'll do that, later on next week. So with that, though, I hope everyone is having a wonderful weekend. If you are on the channel Discord for supporters, we will be starting Power Rangers SPD shortly after this. And I hope to see you there for that. It's going to be a lot of fun. I really like that season. What we do is we usually watch 4 episodes after the live stream. So yeah, I hope everyone stays safe out there. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. And hey, don't fall for looks like. It's never a good argument. All right. See you later, everybody. Hey, before you leave, I just want to take a second to thank my patrons and channel members, especially those pledging $20 or above. Benthoven, Thoravara, Tapioca Weasel, Whispers, Elleron Teller, Horseflesh, Ian Chen, Kelvin Brostek Van Manen, Landon Noel, Mabdy Babdy, Sphincter of Doom, Vollus, John Ackerman, E2V, and Strawberry Vein. It's because of my channel members and patrons whom you're seeing on screen that this channel can stay afloat. Without you, it would all shut down. If you want to join the team, there's a link to join the channel below this video, and there's a link to join the Patreon in the description. On the Patreon, you can get a 10% discount for pledging annually, and either way, you get early access to virtually all of my scripted videos, often 3 to 5 months before they come out for the general public. Thanks for watching.